Thank you. So after F&B, we are about I also sell F&B. Now, a couple of months back when we started building up the agenda, we've been talking about total revenue management for a very, very long time. And I didn't want to spend time again talking about total revenue management, bore you with the same concepts, same thought process, which you all agree upon, but we still don't do anything about it as an industry. Sorry to say that. So F&B today is a critical part of our revenue share, right? And during pandemic, I think most of us will agree to the fact that hotels did a lot of experimentation, whether it was building up cloud kitchens or whether it was doing delivery, building up new packages to push F&B. But commercially speaking, and that's the million-dollar question, do we really own F&B? As a director of sales and marketing on property, as a revenue manager on property, do you really own food and beverage? So that's the question we will try to answer today. And remember, we are talking about it more from a commercial aspect, so I will have an element of marketing, I will have an element of technology, we will talk about product, which is more on the operation side, and obviously the branding part as well. So with that, let me welcome my fellow panelists. Let me start with welcoming Stephanie Abujaude, who's the Senior Area Director of Marketing and Communications for MEA with the Radisson Hotels Group. Stephanie, please welcome on the stage. Daniel Kurai is the Vice President of Total Revenue Management, TRM, for Atlantis, and this is one property, one hotel that really does very well when it comes to TRM. Welcome, Daniel. I've got Ursula Wenzel, who's the founder and CEO of Balcony 8. Welcome to our little balcony here. And I have the voice of operations with Philip Mahoney, and he's the Vice President of Food and Beverage for India, Middle East, Africa, and Turkey, IMEAT, with Accor Hotels. And to give company to the lady in green, I have a man in green. Please welcome Voice of Technology, Ashwin. And Ashwin Kamlani is the co-founder and CEO of Juicer Pricing. What a name, Juicer. Let's get those juices. Thank you, Ashwin. So let me first start with welcome once again. We will try and talk about the 3 Ps in particular, right? We will try and focus around the product, the pricing part, and the positioning part. But I can't promise you the sequence, so we'll see how the momentum really kind of builds up. But let me start with Philip, with you. From an F&B point of view, when I look at the things, right? For me, the number one, and me and Daniel were just chatting around the lunchtime, it's all about building that culture, getting that mindset ready. And when we talk about that mindset, sorry to say that, but we first think about general managers, the top leadership on property. So the question to you is, when you look at your remit around food and beverage, where do you think we are lacking? Not specifically an Accor question, this is more how you look at it from an industry point of view, where we are lacking commercially when we think about food and beverage.
Well, I think the first thing is that you're right about the culture, by the way. It starts with the general manager, and whenever anything went wrong in one of my hotels, when I was a GM, one of my former colleagues used to say, "The fish rots from the head down, Mahoney." You know that person. Anyway, so definitely get the culture right. But I think I don't want to say where we're going wrong, because there are a lot of really good places out there, and there are a lot of hotels that do it really, really well. But what I would say is that what people quite often miss is the sort of the holistic package of what you're offering, and making sure that you've got a complete brand definition without sort of treading on your toes, Ursula. So we look at concepts from a really holistic point of view. The food and drink is an important part of it, but it's it is the last thing that you experience in the whole journey. So to make sure that you get the design right, the ambience particularly, I'll come back to that, the people obviously, making sure that you're investing the right amount and getting the right people, and then the activation and the ESG piece, and then sort of wrapping it all up with the comms mechanism. So I think if you look at ambience, that's one of the things that hotels really quite often do very badly. So I always talk to people about being able to land a plane in a restaurant, So let's take the rule of thumb that, if the lighting's, if you can't read the menu, then your lighting's about right. Music is critically important in the sound system. So we know that people will spend more, they'll spend longer in a place where the music is right, played through a proper sound system, and then the scent as well. And very few people, everyone gets a little bit jittery about using scent in restaurants and bars. We really advocate it all the time because, again, it has an impact on dwell time and everything. So it's little things like that we think are really, really important to concentrate on and not get so fixated about the food on the plate or the drink in the glass. What you should get fixated is about, as far as that's concerned, is what does the plate look like? How does it feel? And the same with the glass. Much more important than whatever you eat or drink.
But who tells that, right? So, because nobody's stopping you to do that from a general manager's point of view. Is it that that's where I think maybe the whole brand positioning part maybe comes in? Maybe, Ursula, the question to you is, so obviously you've got a restaurant which is already there, right? From a product part, they've done it. Maybe it's already lived its 4 or 5 years of its life. At what stage, and I'm sure, the positioning part kind of comes in every day, not necessarily a 3-year or a 5-year cycle. But if you are to look at it from the brand positioning of the restaurant, we spend a lot of time doing feasibility for the hotels, how I want to position my rooms and my SWOT analysis for the hotel, how I want to do my price positioning, my RGI. There's a lot of effort that goes into that. But when it comes to food and beverage, what do you think are the critical elements that play a big role when it comes to brand positioning of an outlet, of a restaurant?
Well, I would say this, Taran. I think we're not creating food experiences for aliens. We're creating them for human beings. Absolutely. And I think fundamentally we work with our senses as human beings. And I think it's, as a hotel team, where I will challenge everyone is to audit in your own minds. What are you tasting? What are you hearing? What are you seeing? And doubling down on the concept. And too often today, I walk into restaurants, or as professionals, we walk into restaurants, and we know exactly, as Philip said, the lighting is off or the sound is incorrect. But the average man on the street that is enjoying our restaurant doesn't understand that or doesn't have the narrative. They might just say to their friend, "Oh, it was okay, the food was okay, but I don't think I'll go back there." And I think that's where us as professionals come in to support hotels at infancy, understanding what the concept is and then doubling down on that. And too often today I walk into restaurants that feel quite schizophrenic and they don't really understand who they are. And so what you say, the positioning is very important, and it's extremely exciting for us as an agency to be called in at infancy stage. So, for me, there are 4 robust phases of restaurant development. And the first one is obviously concept development. It's extremely exciting for us as an agency to be called in at that stage. Other hospitality companies or destinations have teams of people. Hotels, run thin on team in terms of marketing. And so call us in as agency early, at infancy, at concept, so we can help you, hold your hand and run the gauntlet through, then brand design, and how brand design influences interior design, and how interior design then influences operational design. And so for me, to answer your question, is to go back to core and always ask, who are we? And how do we need to then manifest in all its moving parts? We often get called by clients and say, "Oh, we don't need strategy, we don't need data, we've done that." And for me, it's the kiss of death. That is so critical. Data is currency. And the more data you have, the more information on your consumer, the stronger your concept development will be, and the stronger your guest experience will be, because you know fundamentally who you are. So I can speak for days. I will step back right now.
But it's 100% true, right? I mean, we are half day past of the session, and you've seen we've talked about data so much. And majority of that was maybe primarily hinting more towards the room side, right? Katie talked about how things are moving in, which source market is coming. I mean, we've not branded it as rooms data. when the customer from US is coming or from UK is coming, he or she is not going to just impact your heads in the beds. It's also about what he or she eats at the restaurant, right? So data is still very, very important, but I think somewhere, question to you, Stephanie, is if we are not getting those specialists, the people who specialize in that job at an early stage, why is it today that our commercial teams are not spending enough time thinking about that positioning, one, and the second part is the actual marketing of F&B, because I also see a lot of gaps around how you do marketing around food and beverage. Some of the hotels, great stuff, but in general, we kind of lack in that. Maybe it's just because the entire focus is again on the room side. So why do you think, the whole positioning and marketing on the F&B side takes possibly a second stage?
I mean, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, good. Compared to what? I mean, Taran, I just want to ask you, compared to what do you think we lag behind?
To room side, I would say.
Okay.
The whole effort goes into the rooms planning, rooms positioning.
Yeah.
I mean, we're building 2023 budgets, and I can guarantee each and everyone out there has spent time thinking about their comp sets for next year and what they need to be doing in their RGI positioning. But how many of them have actually thought about actually looking at those 4 or 5 outlets and saying, oh, we have a crisis, we need to change our positioning. Maybe we need to change our marketing approach. So why that second thought?
I mean, I wouldn't call it second thought. That's why I asked the question. I think, to be fair, our region has been leading the hotel F&B scene for a very long time. I think, a lot of my colleagues here would agree that a lot of work has been done, and we tend to forget that on-property marketeers essentially 10, 15, 20 years ago started off as F&B marketing managers or marketing support. So I think we have the expertise and the knowledge. F&B is in our DNA when it comes to hospitality, especially in this region. Now, is there more we can do? Yes. And I think in every ROC conference we talk about hospitality, trying to catch up with other more technology advanced companies and associations. And I think this is what we're trying to do as well with F&B. The rise of standalone restaurants, homegrown restaurants as well, and outlets and bars in our region has also made us step up when it comes to our commercial strategies. I wouldn't say F&B is a second thought, and I think a lot of us here know that within our yearly budgets and planning and comp set and comp checks and all of that, there's separate planning and budgets and strategies for F&B. And I think we just need to continue doing that and continue evolving. We're evolving, and yes, we take the standalone restaurants and the big brands as an example, and they just, it creates a healthy competition, and I think we're getting there. We're getting much better at it, but I don't say we lack.
Perfect, okay, point taken. You touched upon the data part, and I think that's where I'll kind of get the two gentlemen talk more on the revenue management and technology side, right? And again, it's a personal experience. So, and I was sharing that with you, Daniel, I think, again, back in the lunchtime. When we go and talk about rooms business, right, for example, and we talk about the fact that, oh, yesterday or last month, we did not meet our budget. Simple problem, right? We all kind of go through that. And you get a very detailed answer. I can get an answer around occupancy, around average rate was a problem, around we losing a particular group, or a segmentation, or even a channel. You get the level of detail. And then you ask a question, oh, last month we did not meet our budget on F&B. And you don't get that level of detail, maybe to 2 data points, primarily around average check, or let's say the number of covers. But you don't get that level of detail when it comes to segmentation of why in F&B we did not meet our budget, what went wrong. So somewhere, the need for data is there. So the question to you, Daniel, and you do a lot of TRM, and Ashwin, you can also jump in on that. In your experience, how important it is for the hotels to plan for that data, and if possible, real-time data, when it comes to food and beverage? Because that will require an investment. Again, goes back to the ops side, whether the GM is signing off to invest in that whole data machine and getting that data sorted out. So what's your requirement? What's the need of data when it comes to your food and beverage business?
Yeah, I think when we started back in 2016, talking about food and thinking about food and beverage revenue management, we wanted to, at one point, manage it really like we do in rooms. So obviously, the nature, and I mean, the ultimate goal is very similar. You want to drive revenue. You can drive it through increasing your seat occupancy or increase your average check. These are the two levers. Now, obviously, in order to do that, you need your KPIs. And I think talking about KPIs, you will need to design a little bit also the expectation so that you can then design the reports that you want to extract. Because at the end of the day, yes, it's revenue, it's seats, it's average check, but also it's understanding how you can actually influence this. And I think, I'll give you specific examples. When we look at the water park, we don't necessarily look at the same way as we look at the restaurant. Simply, we more look at the spend per cap, so for per admission. And this is because sometimes the strategy changes. You have closures, you have opening, or you have a different type of capacities all the time. So what is important to measure your performance is actually see how much the guests spend per person when they walk in the park. Obviously, when we look at traditional restaurants, we can extract all the data that you want. And I think we may think that we really need very important reports and systems to do that, but I assure you that some extracts also from your just financial data, you can get a pretty good understanding on a daily basis how many covers you can do, as well as the average check, as well as the revenues, and then you can actually build your own reports. You plug in the capacities of the restaurant, and then you start having a look at the table occupancy. You can put the total number of seats, and you start then measuring the seat occupancy. And then the table turns. Now, I think capacity is also defining capacity, and what capacity is. I think it's really important, simply because according to the type of service that you deliver, according to the brand of the restaurant, you may look at 2.5 turns, 3 turns, or you may be looking at 1 turn. And I give you an example. Oceano, today, we do 1 turn, and that's it. The meal duration is 4 hours plus. So that's pretty much the maximum we can do, and it's simply straightforward how many seats you have on the floor times 1. Now, a no-booth service that it's a lot more faster, easygoing to share concept, we are looking at 2.3 to 2.5, really in high season. So now, obviously, you have a different type of capacities that you need to calculate together with food and beverage. And physically, my team, from time to time, I send them to the restaurants to recount. And the numbers are always a little bit different than what we are given from operations, and what the reality is, etc. And then eventually, what we can influence is basically, as Anastasia presented earlier, even the pacing in the table management system to make sure that in order to reach 2.5, you need an X amount of seats and covers early, and then a little bit later, so that you can really cover the full cycle. So, and once again, the quality of the data, I think, is super critical. From a room's perspective, most of the data comes directly from the bookings, which the quality is there. But when you look at what you extract from a food and beverage perspective, from a POS perspective, in 2016, in Atlantis, we were sitting with over 85,000 entries as menu entries. It took us a year to clean the data, and we went down to 25,000.
But that's because we're all using, most of us are using a dreadful point-of-sale system. That's a standard thing in hotels. We all use this rubbish Micros. Doesn't give us any clean data. So I just say, I'm sorry. But anyway, so if we started using a proper point-of-sale system, then we'd be much better. And that's a lesson for hotels worldwide.
So we need to invest. I mean, you hinted upon the table management solution, right? I mean, there are now obviously technology and tools that are available to kind of get the right technology in place so that you can get the clean data. Ashwin, your thoughts? I mean, you talk to so many outlets, restaurants. From a data and technology point of view, how does that marriage works?
Yeah, I mean, look, so I joined the hotel industry about 20 years ago, right after September 11th. And it was a time when the whole industry was in chaos, but the rapid digitization of the industry allowed for more data, more analytics, and finally dynamic prices. Not to mention sudden rise of third-party intermediaries and high commissions and things like that. That's exactly what's happening in food and beverage and restaurants today. So after COVID, you had this sudden, swarm of people booking, or let's say purchasing on digital channels. And now you have the whole restaurant industry, and I would argue now should be the F&B industry within hotels, saying, wow, we really need to kick up our game. We need to make sure that we have a good purchasing experience, an online purchasing experience. We need to look at, we heard from Kempinski earlier about what can we do with the existing data we have. That same question should be asked with F&B. There's so much data in the system. And when I talk to restaurants, they say, I don't even know how to access that data. Even if I did, I don't have a data scientist to actually analyze that data. And even if I did have a data scientist, we've got an inflation crisis, we've got a labor crisis. I don't even have the people that could actually act on that data. And so, this is the time. Last night I checked into the Voco, beautiful hotel, and they told me, oh, if you want to order anything on room service, just open your television. And I was like, wow, I'm excited to see this. So I opened up the TV, and it said, click here for in-room dining, and sure enough, it was a static PDF picture of the menu card, Luckily they could zoom in, but then if I wanted to order, I had to pick up the phone and order, right, over the phone. Wouldn't you love to know how many people clicked on a certain menu item but didn't order? How would you like to know how many people, put all these things in their basket and went to the checkout and saw something that they didn't like, and you got, you didn't convert for whatever reason? So,
exactly, all of the stuff we do that on the room side, right? That's where my irony is. That's why the topic I also sell F&B, because you get those data around how much time the consumer is spending on your website, at what page the reservation did not materialize.
Yeah.
So imagine all of that data that can really bring in on the food and beverage side.
And we're in very initial state. Look, this is going to get really sophisticated. Okay, so we as a company, we're looking at how do weather patterns impact the sale of certain items? What about when there's a special event? What does that do to pizza and chicken wing sales and things like that? You can start to tie, your forecast of occupancy levels to how you should be pricing your F&B items. That's obviously going to require an advancement on digital menu technology throughout the F&B operation, but this is coming. I mean, to your point, even just using basic data to make better decisions about what pricing should be. And just to be clear, we're not talking about doubling prices or tripling prices. This is, playing within a range of 10 or 20% up and down can have a huge impact on the bottom line of the F&B operation, but you have to give yourself the tech, the analytics, and the flexibility to get there.
That's exactly actually my next question, but before I go on to that, first, can I get a raise of hands? Hotels which are on 100% digital menus. Just raise your hand if your outlets are on 100% digital menus. 1, 2, 3. The rest is all the opportunity sitting in this room today.
I would argue, though, there's a digital menu and then there's a digital menu, right? PDF, to me, is not digital menu.
Yeah, digital as in what he talked about. Click and you are going through end-to-end all digital. The whole journey needs to be digital. We're not talking about digital as a QR code and a PDF file. No static on that. Even if you have static pricing, but the digital experience needs to be end-to-end. Great, so
you have to consider though, when it comes to digital menus, not everyone wants to use that medium. So you have to, or it's advisable to have choices. It's much easier to optimize a digital menu, obviously.
Yes.
And but nevertheless, there is a certain reluctance to it. To my earlier point about the point of sale system, if then you can click on that menu item and then you're then gathering data, if then it doesn't talk to the point of sales provider because they want a $10,000 fee to interface the thing, then you've got an obstacle. And that's a fundamental problem.
Right.
We have to work with partners that are going to be interested in gathering data, not just making money.
So
and with
we
all
have
due
the
respect,
Oracle
Phil,
guys in the
at the
room
risk
today.
of
We can talk
creating
to them.
some controversy, 20 years ago, when hotels started taking their brochures and putting them online, nobody liked that either, right? And that's what's happening now. right? So if I have to pick up the menu and then zoom in to check that's a horrible experience.
Yeah.
So I think what's going to happen now is you're going to see a revolution on digital menus and ordering
for sure.
F&B
Yeah.
on your device or on a television, and that will make it a much more pleasant experience for the consumer that they actually want to interact with.
So, you know,
But then you need the point of sale system to work with it.
That's
Otherwise,
right.
you've got nothing.
That's right.
Yeah.
so going back to what you talked earlier, and then Philip hinted as well, dynamic pricing, right? When it comes to rooms again, we are experts in that, right? You may be getting a room right now at 1,000 dirhams in Dubai. You come in the summertime, maybe you'll get it at 300 dirhams. We call it dynamic pricing, so we play around with, and we are very proud of how we kind of, you know, do the pricing when it comes to rooms. On the F&B side, and that's what Philip said, right? Why is it that we have that fear and a bit of an anxiety around, oh, I don't want to do, you know, dynamic pricing? And I've spoken to a couple of general managers in the past, in company, outside the company, even some owner groups as well. For me, I thought, after talking to them, it's the fear of unknown. There is also an anxiety around, oh, it's my regular customer, what he or she will think. In your experience, and you are, you know, looking at European market as a big time, what's the fear? Is it the fear of unknown?
Look, you're going to hear me talk a lot about history. I mean, when we started doing e-commerce, I used to run e-commerce globally for Melia Hotels and Resorts. You cannot imagine the internal battles I had 15, 20 years ago. No, this e-commerce thing, it's dangerous. You know, the tour operators are going to revolt against us and things like that. So I think it is a lot of well, we've never done that before, and what's the result going to be? But if you look in certain markets, and actually we're more focused on America and Asia as of now, because we think that culturally there's more of an acceptance of price dynamism in the market. If you look at certain markets, even in the US, today when a customer orders from Uber or DoorDash on that app,
Yes.
and it's no coincidence that Dara, the former CEO of Expedia, is now running Uber.
Yes.
But you have situations that when things are busy, it's a busy Saturday night, they say, hey, listen, that delivery that would normally charge, you know, pay you $3, now it's $9, right? And it's up to the customer to say, well, you know what, I'm more price sensitive, so I'm going to either order earlier or I'm going to wait until that price goes down. But that philosophy that the consumer would never accept paying a higher amount for the same exact meal is clearly a fallacy, because a lot of people are doing it. And so what's happening is F&B operators and restaurateurs are leaving money on the table, and they know it now. So there's this movement toward, wait a minute, I'm getting killed on inflation, labor, I can see the third parties making more money, there's more money to be made, how do I do that? And so there's an opportunity.
And I think somewhere in the concept of dynamic pricing, I think it's not just about charging high, right? The happy hours, the ladies' night free on a Tuesday, they're also dynamic pricing, but that's like saying, okay, it's discounting. And we're not necessarily saying that dynamic pricing is all about increasing it. We're all talking about how to get your pricing better or right, not necessarily high or low. That high or low can be an outcome of what that pricing strategy is going to be.
Absolutely, totally agree. And we've heard a lot today about the economic outlook. And I would argue that now that we are potentially going into a recession, the concept of getting the optimal price is even more important than earlier. You'd be amazed, I mean, maybe you wouldn't be amazed. When I talk to most restaurants, like, how do you come up with your pricing today? Well, we sit around a table with a pen and paper and we literally just guess, and that's our pricing.
Philip is
we kind of
smiling.
increased that a few times because of inflation, but we really have no idea, right? And so now that you can use a data-driven approach to actually look at, hey, you know, what happened over the last year? Let's look at that data, let's create a forecast, and let's look at the future potential impacts on pricing. There's no reason not to do it.
Great. Stephanie and Daniel, questions to you. Typical hotel scenario, right? And you said you're doing great when it comes to F&B marketing. In an ideal scenario, how best food and beverage marketing or marketing in general will work effectively with revenue management or commercial sales included? What will that combination really look like? How do you think that partnership will work and you guys can kind of work together? I mean, share those tips with our audience here. What can be that ideal scenario where marketing and revenue management come hand in hand to drive the food and beverage strategy?
I mean, I think it's a little bit more than just marketing and revenue coming together. We've been talking about alignment in almost every session throughout the day today. And it's basically an alignment that needs to happen between the commercial teams, but also with the operations teams, in order for an outlet to be successful. We need to design the perfect experiences for our customers, but we also need to tell the stories of these perfect experience or great experiences to our customers. And this is what happens when everyone is aligned. It's not just about selling or pricing. It's not just about having a great concept. It's also about telling the story. And I think everyone working together and aligned creates success.
But the need of, okay, my Sunday is not looking that great, or my Easter is coming and I'm not sitting on good enough reservations. Marketing, I need your help. I need to push something around the sale. I'm talking about those partnerships, right? The day-to-day conversations that happen on the property, the day-to-day problems that a revenue manager goes through. I'm sure you guys do that effectively when it comes to your property in terms of driving that?
Yeah, so we do have those conversations when it's down to special events, when it's down to branches, for example. So whenever you can really measure, your pickup,
right,
and really you can also compare with past trends and what looks good and what it doesn't look good. We certainly do have those conversations. Have we done enough marketing? Can we push a little bit more? Can you actually go out a little bit earlier? In Atlantis there is literally at least 2-3 events every month. And whether it's a DJ set or whether it's branches everywhere, whether it's New Year, whether it's the Christmas branches, etc. So that happens. What does not necessarily happen is moving a step back and really talking about, okay, so what's the marketing strategy for this specific restaurants? Now, we are doing strides towards that direction as well. And we do flag and we do monitor, now that we look at availability of restaurants on a weekly basis and with 2 weeks window, we certainly can see when it's becoming softer or not, but we don't necessarily have the same marketing power in terms of spend to actually go immediately and just push on a specific day, on a specific week. It's more about brand campaigns all the time, and obviously it's about inviting a lot of the influencers and leverage a lot on the PR side to actually have a visibility about the restaurants as such.
Very, very simple question. At a property level, you do your revenue meetings, right?
Yeah.
Like all our revenue managers in the room. Do you do separate revenue meetings for food and beverage and separate for rooms?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's completely different audience.
Great.
We have the participation of the chefs. We have the participation of the food and beverage management. We have the participation of marketing, sales. Obviously,
so again, a show of hands, how many revenue managers or hotel representatives here have separate revenue meetings for your food and beverage and a chef participating in that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's where we kind of again need that focus and energy to come in. I mean, you talked about chef. I mean, imagine a chef coming into a revenue meeting, so much of insight. And I think, Daniel, you also said one thing. He mentioned in that, while he was talking, I think giving answer to one of my earlier questions, you talked about you guys go into the restaurant, spend some time there.
Yes.
I think as a revenue manager, just going and standing in a restaurant, you will be able to kind of absorb a lot of data around what's really happening in terms of consumer trends. Ursula, question back to you, and Philip, you as well. You guys are there in the business. You talked about the product and positioning part initially. 2023 approaching, what's the consumer trends that you are looking at from a Middle East point of view? From a F&B evolution, what's the new trends that you are seeing that are happening in the business today? And how the hotels need to get ready for it? Anything exciting that is happening?
Thanks, Philip.
Got 2 hours, yeah?
I will say this, I mean, certainly after or post-pandemic, what we're noticing as an agency very much is that return to human connection.
Yeah.
And it's so easy to forget in a world of AI and metaverse that is fast approaching. So tomorrow, please don't forget, there's a really good session on metaverse. It's very important to understand what edge do we have over AI, and that is human connection, and really double down on that and go through your concept, go through your brand, go through your experience within your restaurant through the lens of being human, and that connection point will click eventually. The other thing I would say is that there is huge opportunity in even all-day dining. So look at your dead spaces within your restaurants. Look at them as opportunities. Hilton Group right now, for example, are doing really well with this. They're using their dead spaces or their all-day dining destinations as almost test beds for concepts. So they're starting to look at, yes, popping up for breakfast, but lunch and dinner service is potentially getting in a new concept or a celebrity chef, or testing that out and then seeing the salience of that particular concept, and then implementing and following through with CapEx allocation.
She talked about all-day dining, and Philip, I really love that example that you had given the other day, talking about all-day dinings being
I can't remember what I said now, Tam.
end of the hotel.
It just flashes. It only appears in my brain for a millisecond and then goes somewhere else. But I'll pick up on that point. I think, well, first of all, that your first point, rather than expanding out, but that notion of conscious consumption, I think, is something that will become more and more prevalent. Not only the social connection, but also the thinking about the wider community as a whole and actually giving a shit about other people. Sorry, excuse me. Just for once, I know. And then on the all-day dining piece, when did all-day dining become such a bad word or bad expression? And we've done it's such a disservice. But if you look at the rest of the industry, if you look at places like, I don't know, like Chiltern Firehouse or Pigalle, or really cool all-day restaurants that have made all-day dining a thing and made it a massive tradition that it is, a massive trend that it is today. But we put a bloody mortuary slab in the middle of a room and think that's all-day dining, and we call it a buffet, but it's a mortuary slab. And that sort of nonsense approach to functionality over aesthetic or over experience is something that's just got to stop. It's just nonsense. Because all we do is we say, oh, we've got to serve 600 breakfasts, 1,000 breakfasts, whatever it is, and think that we can create a wonderful place for lunch and dinner on the back of that. It's nuts. I mean, no one in their right mind would do it. So we've got to stop all that nonsense. I think that people are moving in that direction. We've got a lot of places that are, we're just doing a really super brasserie rather than, whatever, we'll make breakfast work somehow. Let's worry about that another day.
Yeah, I will say this about Chiltern Firehouse. So I'm a big fan of Andre Belaz myself, and he has so many light settings. He's big into lighting. So something as simple as mood lighting and like going your transition from morning to afternoon to dinner time service, those kind of nuances really do make a difference at a human level.
Absolutely.
You talk about human connections, the human senses, right? We were talking about the scent, the music, the light.
Absolutely.
So I think all those elements kind of come together when it comes to the product. Invisible branding.
How
absolutely.
your staff are answering the phones, what music is being played against your concept. Is there a disconnect, or is it telling your story? Storytelling is so critical.
Great. Last 6 minutes, I want to kind of pick your brains. Clear message to the audience, right? Your moment of impact and influence. 1 or 2 tips that you would like all your marketeer friends in the room to go back with. Same for revenue management, operations, and on the revenue management and sales side. Stephanie.
If I pick one, I'd say personalization. We talk a lot about personalization when it comes to rooms, again, pre-stay, post-stay, and things like that. I think it's exactly the same for F&B. One of my favorite restaurants, I won't mention, here in Dubai, I go to the entire time and nowhere else because of the way they handle their pre and post day experience. Dining experience.
That's not in Radisson?
They make you feel special. Sorry?
That's not in Radisson?
I'm not going to say. They make you feel, I'm not here to promote brands. They make you feel special, all the time. And I'm sure they do that to everybody. And that's why it's so successful. It's such a successful concept. So for me, it's definitely personalization. Yeah.
And you need data for that. Ashwin?
I was at a conference in Las Vegas 2 weeks ago, and I heard somebody say something
So cool. Yeah, so cool.
Yeah, I heard somebody say something that really stuck with me, and he said, we cannot solve tomorrow's problems with yesterday's solutions. And I thought that was so on point. And I think, again, in the hotel industry, those that really invested heavily in e-commerce, distribution, digital marketing, analytics, those are the companies that vaulted ahead, right? Yep. And I would argue that's now where we are with restaurants and F&B. So my advice is,
invest in technology.
Invest in technology and get access to the data and use it as much as possible to make smarter decisions.
Philip?
Well, I think for the audience, I would say stay true to your brand, and I don't mean your hotel brand, I mean your restaurant brand. But I think above all, the biggest takeaway is make sure you invest in your people. These are the most important asset you have, and we think that it's okay to pay people a pittance and not reward them properly and just fill it with numbers. So it's about the people. Get right people in play. Product, brand, investment in human capital. Yeah. Ursula?
I would say this, I'm speaking to a bunch of commercial teams, is try not to value engineer too much on brand. Especially when you're working with an agency that can really hold your hand and run the gauntlet through the process. We have today a lot of clients that are actually understanding why strategy is so vital before they see any visuals on graphics or design or logos, is that they're actually using those values at an operational design stage to actually hire staff against brand concept. Yep. And those are really, really strong opportunities for operations teams.
Get the specialist to do the specialist job.
Yes.
Great. Daniel?
Yeah. So from my side, I heard today that a lot of people are really interested in deploying food and beverage revenue management. My advice would be, if you want to do it, you need to be prepared for a cultural change and a shift. And it needs really to come literally from the top, from the CEO all the way down, or from the managing director all the way down. Because even if you have a bunch of reports at the end of the day, you will not be effectively change or move the needle that much unless you don't have the full buy-in and cooperation from operations, from the chefs, from the service staff. When I was talking about bad data, it was not just about the entry in the menu and the POS. The number of covers that they have been punched on a daily basis are done from a colleague entry level. If they don't understand the importance of that, your data will never really tally and make sense. I think this is not a short-term investment. You get a system and all of a sudden you have all the answers. It's going to take time. It's going to be a learning curve, and probably every scenario is going to be very, very different from one another. Everyone's needs are going to be very, very different. And you may not even need half of the things we do, maybe because you are not busy enough, and maybe you actually want to spend a bit more in marketing rather than actually doing stuff and availability checks as such, because you always have plenty of availability. So overall, it's really about culture, believing it. This requires an investment, and it really requires a lot of training, and possibly a consultant that actually tells you what to do.
And courage. This is not the moment to be making decisions based on fear.
Absolutely.
This is time to be bold and do new things.
Yeah, and we talked about human connections, right? I think we need to make those human connections first internally within the hotel operations, right? Within that, because that's where the culture exactly kind of the change will happen. So thank you very much for all your insights. Guys will be here. If you have more questions around food and beverage, please reach out to them. Lots and lots of knowledge that you can get from these people. Thank you very much for my panel. Thank you. Over to you, Gemma. Thank you so much.